recorder, Kenny Smyers. What episode are we, buddy?
359.
359, okay. And April 19th. Okay, here we go. Hi, welcome to Control Talk, now your smart buildings video cast and podcast for the week ending April 19th, 2020. This is episode 359, where we talk about controls, smart buildings, smart people. If Marc Petock's on the show, smart looking women from his days back in the day. And speaking of Marc Petock, he is joining myself, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only Kenny Smyers. He's going to be on the whole show with us. So sit back and relax for about the next 58 minutes. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff, starting with hello, Marc.
Good afternoon,
Eric, you didn't let me do my introduction. I wanted to introduce
hang on. I'm sorry. Kenny didn't get his introduction. So, Marc, here we go. And ladies and gentlemen, your host and mine, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only, secret agent man, 007, smartest man in the room, the one, the only, Kenny Smyers. Welcome to the show, Big Dog. How was that for an introduction? Kenny? Mark, you just got all frozen up on that intro, I'm guessing.
Did he?
Did I? I'm looking good. Yeah. Anyhow, great introduction, Eric. Thank you very much. It says my internet connection is unstable. We've felt that regionally here. There's something going on. There's overusage. It's Friday. Probably every child in America is on two computer programs. At least the mom's on the iPhone and the dad's on a Zoom meeting, or vice versa. It's just everybody's maxing out our digital airwaves.
Man, Marc, we might have to carry this show. We're going to have the Kenny, it's kind of like a Groundhog Day or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, Marc, I think what Kenny was saying is that in Pittsburgh, man, the bandwidth is down. It's a great pose. At least they froze him like this. I mean, he looks very handsome like this. So
he does.
I think this is going to be an interesting show because we're going to go back and forth between Kenny making points and Kenny being a statue. So
I'm looking at his frozen picture now. That would make a great U.S. stamp.
It would make a great stamp. As a matter of fact, I want to go get my easel. I think I could paint him now. He's like a perfect model. So listen, I know Kenny's been talking about the problem with the internet. I mean, we haven't experienced that too much here. It seems like you guys got pretty good internet where you're at, right?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm working out of the house in Richmond, Virginia, and so far we have not experienced anything. The only thing, from an infrastructure thing the other day is somebody was driving down one of the interstates and they hit a power pole or something, and the transformer blew, and so we had a little bleeping, here or there for about a half an hour. But other than that, it's been, no problems.
Well, I think it's great we brought you on from the beginning of the show because it sounds like it might be me and you for most of the show. My guess is it looks like Kenny's trying to get back in. Yeah. And as soon as he does, we'll bring him back on. But I have a feeling that this is going to go on the whole show. So listen, for our audience out there, what's the over-under? How many times will Kenny Smyers get frozen on this show? Marc, what's your pick?
I'm going to say 5 or 6.
5 or 6, okay, yeah. I'm thinking 8 or 9. And dude, we're just gonna keep rolling. This is going to be a really interesting show. We're going to get to practice doing our ad libs. It's kind of like one of those, what do they call the people that the improv things? Here's Kenny back. The improv things, where you get up there and you just have to improv. And do that. So here's Kenny Smyers. Looks like he's coming back on, and there he is. Ken Smyers is back.
Or instead of improv, we could say we're in Washington D.C. and we can be doing filibustering.
There you go. Hey, Kenny, you're back.
Right. We see a shadow. We see Marc as a guest.
Oh, that was my lovely wife.
Yeah.
You can say hi to Ken and Eric in the audience.
Where's
Hello,
Connie?
guys. How are you?
Connie, good. Hello. Great. How about yourself?
I can't hear you. That's
she can't
okay.
She's not plugged in.
Nice.
Well, good. And I thought that was one of those supermodels you used to hang out in the 80s with.
She is a supermodel. Absolutely.
All right.
that was nice.
So Kenny, we're going to call this the improv show. We've already put out to the audience, how many times is your internet going to freeze up? The over-under. Marc is picking 6 times.
Oh, dear.
I'm thinking 7 or 8. But, man, it was the way it froze you last time was just a really, really nice image. I'm going to send that to you so you can put it on your Instagram account.
Oh, if it's a flattering one, I'll use it. If it's not, I won't use it. But yeah, I had to shut things down. I had to reboot the our router. service has been challenged. I mean, all the technical difficulties we experienced with this new way of doing things. I mean, we talked offline about how our lives have been changed and how we're using digital instead of in person, and how we're all adapting to it. But is the bandwidth there? I mean, our service providers, the way I understand it, they sell service like they do health memberships to the fitness studios, that they oversell it by at least 30%. And then that day after New Year's, when everybody comes to their resolution happy and they want to work out, there's no room for them because there's more memberships than there are equipment. But we're supposedly operating at 40 to 50% over what our expected usage is for all our, satellite and everything we're doing using these Zoom meetings and whatever. And so it's a real credit to the people that put this stuff in. We do have a really outstanding infrastructure that we can sustain this kind of communication as an alternative way to live here. So it's
right. Well, Kenny, if you get froze up again, what we want you to do is go up and down your street, knock on the doors, and tell those kids to get off the internet until we're
playing
through
those
this
games.
show. Okay,
That's right.
Hey, my sisters have everybody in our family is sharing. We're doing a happy hour here, I think at 4:00 later on this afternoon, but their children are doing that education stuff. So you have 3 different kids connected to 3 different school scenarios or whatever. And then they're watching videos as part of it, and then they have to like watch a movie or whatever, do a report on it. So every single person, it's not just us that's using the digital stuff. It's every single person that's communicating with their peer groups and stuff. So, and then, and Marcus, you were telling us about the very challenging moments you had that was kind of personal, but the clergies and everybody is adapting in a new way to provide the services remotely. And it's going to change the way we look at ourselves in a mirror. We're going to go through life differently. Autonomous vehicles was a huge leap, and we all got excited that, they did this thing in Las Vegas where they had that test track. I don't know if you guys followed that. I did very briefly, but all the big BMW, Tesla, everybody had a chance to take their autonomous vehicle through a track where they were challenged as far as safety. They'd throw stuff in front of the car and see how quickly it could react or whatever. And it was amazing how well these cars performed. And it's accelerating the adoption of autonomous vehicles. So this COVID-19 is going to accelerate the adoption of all the technologies that we use in our business and how we communicate.
Not only that, it's going to get rid of some social norms that have been around since close to the beginning of the time. I understand the handshake is a thing of the past. And Kenny, you were telling me that somebody got arrested in Pittsburgh for spitting on somebody.
They were charged as a terrorist act. The saliva, this COVID-19, because of the potential the person could transmit a deadly virus through spitting at someone, they were charged with terrorism. And think of the difference between minor altercation, or assault versus terrorism charge. That's a big difference on the ticket.
Felony, I would assume.
Yeah. And for our audience out there, in case you hadn't put it together yet, we are going to sort of talk about how the virus is affecting not just our personal lives, but also, how it's going to affect our business, the smart building, the HVAC controls business, and what's going to be different about it. And so we're probably going to entertain you this time because you got a lot of information out there right now. Everybody's doing, like Kenny said, everybody's doing the Zoom meetings and all kinds of serious stuff. So hopefully somewhere along the line, Kenny will do his stand-up comic routine for us. But we're gonna tie it all back together. So Marcus, how are things with you, and how are things at Lynxspring?
Everything's well with me personally. From the personal standpoint of view, you guys know all the travel that I do or did. And I didn't miss it initially, but I'm telling you, it's getting to a point where I'm actually missing being on an airplane, if you can believe it. So, but with respect to Lynxspring, business is good. Our development team is still working. We're still fulfilling orders for the most part as fast as they can come in. And we're not really seeing a slowdown yet. And I think it's, equated, we talk about this whole thing from the big picture. I think it's happening for a couple reasons. So one, there were a lot of projects that were on the books. And I think everybody in the industry know that there was a lot of projects on the books. And I think as this started to take shape and we were beginning to have to deal with a different way of doing things, people pushed those projects as fast as they could. So they could, because they were already funded, They're already there. So I think from the controls perspective, the orders and shipments for controls kept up for a while. And most of those were already either retrofits or new constructions that were at a point that where controls could go in. But I think what we're going to see is the fact that new construction has obviously slowed down a lot. So I think we're going to start seeing some delays coming up in the next, I'm going to say towards May, June, July timeframe, but we'll ramp back up again in August for sure.
What about you, Eric? How's things down there in Atlanta, Georgia? In Orlando?
Well, you know, we're business as usual. Our counter's open. We still got the shipments coming in. It's not as there's not as much traffic coming into the office as there was. All our salespeople are working from home. We had set up a phone structure so people could work from home. So it was kind of a perk, you know. You would have one or two people, you know, they would get a week where they could work from home. They didn't have to deal with the traffic and all the stuff coming in, and we just sort of rotated those people out. So the transition from that to having all of our salespeople, you know, be able to work remotely was seamless. And so the people that are in our place are the warehouse people and the counter people, and then, you know, Rob Allen and, you know, a couple of the execs, you know, come in and out of there. But it's you know, all our receptionist works from a remote switchboard. And that's seamless, and it's so I'm answering this sort of in two ways. One is, you know, business is holding up. I think a lot of it, to Marc's point. I've talked to a couple of our engineers, and they've got projects on the books for, you know, the next 4 to 5 months. But we had a backlog, to Marc's point, and then the backlog is getting worked off. So I'm wondering if we're going to see an adverse effect on business as we know it, maybe 6 months to 7 months out when the backlog sort of worked off.
Interesting. We, in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, and now we're part of the Jackson team, we see two different scenarios. One, my brother and I have West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania. West Virginia was storming, to your point. They took opportunities to go to those unoccupied buildings and accelerate the plans that they had on file. Some of the larger contracts were fulfilled, and it was a good thing. Pennsylvania, on the other hand, the governor put construction sites off limits and just totally eliminated access to buildings, and that really put a damper on all our service techs. That you know, a lot of them went on unemployment, furloughed, and you know, so that was an immediate impact on some of the stuff. On the other hand, the opportunity to take the quiet time and look at new projects and bids and whatever, we really sent out a lot of numbers over the last 3 weeks, where you know, the feeling is in our area is that this is a setback, but when the time comes and we're back to some sort of a normalcy, there'll be a surge, and that's what we're preparing for. You know, as opportunity favors the prepared, we're taking that motto to heart, and so we got a lot of things on standby. And then overall, the big company Jackson, they're doing fairly well, as you said, with the will calls and the projects. Anybody that is able to is taking advantage of this, making lemonade out of lemons to the best of their ability. So if there's an opportunity to do training, we stepped up on a training, ramped up there quickly. The building automation monthly, BAMS with Phil Zito, he had a remarkable program where he was offering people $10 to his courses. He had 4 courses for $10 between the April 6th and April 16th. So hopefully Phil, I think he was overwhelmed too, that he probably had so many video calls at the same time that his provider probably went through some growing pains on handling the volume of traffic. But so I think all in all, it was a challenge to our way of life, but I think we all came out somewhere improved, and we really were able to sort out, like we have this thing going now, what's your COVID-19 resolution? As soon as this thing's done, what's the first thing you're going to do? You know, fly to Las Vegas and see a show, or everybody has something. Marcus is saying he's got you know, pangs to go flying again. I will never criticize the Pittsburgh Pirates again. If they have the worst team in the league, I don't care. As long as they get to the field and I can go to the game and sit there wherever I want and have a beer and watch baseball again, I will never criticize them again. So that's one of my COVID-19 resolutions.
Well, you know, I think it's a lot like I used to tell my ex-wives, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone.
So let me ask you guys a question. So as this developed, and, you know, obviously working remote, let's talk, there's two sides of remote here. working remote, did you guys in your businesses have a pre-planned remote working strategy, or did you have to kind of scramble and put one together? I'm just curious.
Well, in our case, like I said earlier, we were already doing it, so it was pretty much seamless for us. We just got some more IP phones and sent them out, and it's been real easy for us. And I think and I'll let Kenny answer next. But then I think another thing we need to discuss is, given the fact that working remotely seems to be really, really seamless, how is that going to change the world as we know it? And Kenny, I'll let you hop in on that and answer Mark's question.
I have an office in my house, and then we have an office in Pittsburgh, but we do a lot of traveling. I'd probably spend 3 out of the 5 days going somewhere, and we had a lot of things planned. We had suspended visitor visits for 90 days now, so I don't know if it's going to go the full 90 days, but we do a lot of stuff where we bring in people maybe from Vicon, Lynxspring. We had several events planned with Lynxspring, and they just got canceled immediately, and you can't really do those things on a webinar when you're trying to work with people that are technicians and giving them the opportunity to play with controls and see the differences. EasyIO had a couple of webinars. I don't know how active you guys are in staying up with everything. I always worked remote. I've worked remote probably for the last 15 years, but it was remote to the point where I was in between places to go. And so no shows. Everything got canceled. We had the National Facility Management meeting down there in Baltimore. That was a big one that got canceled. We all know Tritium's and Niagara Summit 2020 got canceled. So these were the things where we go, and that's where we parlay the networking into local business. Somehow it happens where we work with customers, we get them excited about new technologies. Niagara's made a lot of real strong improvements with 4.8, and then 4.9's coming out. So when we don't have the chance to get in front of people and it really make them connect the dots there, and we try to do that remotely, just something's missing there. So I think we'll resume as soon as we're allowed to meet with people, go inside of buildings again. We'll be able to catch up in a hurry. But that was one thing you can't really. We were prepared remotely. I'm used to it. Even these Zoom things, Eric and I, you've been on Zoom every week for 10 years, I think, or Skype or something. So I mean that part of it was pretty routine. But there's something again that when you're in person and you're doing stuff and you're getting people to make decisions or whatever, you can't replace it with a Zoom meeting.
I want to hop in and Mark, I want to get your input too, sure. Because one of the trends I noticed, and Kenny, you and I have talked about this on the phone before, and Mark, you have experienced this. When I first got in the business, getting access to people was easy because the maintenance staffs were overbloated, and if you came up with a box of donuts, they would rather talk to a sales rep than virtually do anything else, right? So, and after 9/11, it got where it was just harder to get access and get in. And I mean, I used to be able to walk into any hospital anywhere. I just go in the back door and I'd find my way around. And you do that now, you're going to get shot, right? And so, I think outside sales has changed a lot anyway. And to your point, Kenny, I think face-to-face meetings are always the best because it gives you time to bond. But my experience was that so many people didn't have time to meet with you unless they had a problem. And I'm wondering now if it's even going to be more like that because, I think if they have a problem, they'll always be willing to see you. But gaining access, I think you're going to have to get really adept at using remote tools because people are going to be used to that now. They're going to be used to the Zoom meeting, and it's not that they won't meet with you, but they better, you're going to have a really damn good reason. So I think it's going to change how outside salespeople operate, among other things.
I would agree with you, and I think beside the time factor, I think as we come out of this and what I like to call recovery readiness is that people are going to think twice now with having that interaction. Again, are we going to automatically practice social distancing and all of that? Will that continue, at least for the near future, even though, we're kind of out of this situation. So I do see that this, for the foreseeable future, this can become part of the norm. to your point, Eric.
Yeah. And I think part of it is that if you think about like shaking hands, for example, as a habit. And when I studied with the hypnotist, one of the things that they put people in a trance is they just reach their hand out to shake your hand, and then they lift it up. And then because it's so habitual that we don't think about it. So to your point, Mark, I wonder if this goes on long enough, if social distancing, it's not going to be you're thinking about it. You're just going to be in the habit of staying 6 feet away and not shaking hands.
Well, again, first of all, I love how we're optimists at core. And I think that's the perfect assessment right then and there is we're all looking positively that it's all going to work out nicely and we're going to follow this May, June, July curriculum that the phase in or return to normalcy is following. But I don't think we're really out of the woods until they get this virus thing, 12 months to 18 months, I believe it is. They're going to have an inoculation that will basically make you safe against COVID-19. But what I really don't have a good measure on is just how reliable everything's are. Like the integrity of a building nowadays. The people you're working with, with these Google, Apple programs that are going to share information and you could register or not register. And then what is privacy? What do you have a right to know? What does a person next to you in a bus need to know about you? As far as you're transmitting, it was one thing if it's a sexual offender or something to that extreme, they put that on the websites, and if somebody was in your neighborhood, you get a notice. If you can't, come to 100% certainty that you've got this thing under control, will never fully return. And when they're talking about limiting the number of people in restaurants and buildings, and they're talking about only essential. So if you go to the doctors, everybody's going to wait outside for you. You don't bring people in. You don't have this automatic assumption that there's going to be a seat in this building for you anymore. So, personal reservations, so your digital calendars, everything you're going to do now is probably going to be mapped out. You're going to have the building you're going to go into is going to have a COVID-19 green plus sign or minus sign that they have, whatever. Every time you go now to a plane, you're probably going to have to wear a mask on a plane. In Pennsylvania right now, everybody going to work inside of a building with other people has to be wearing a mask during that time. You can take it off during breaks.
Right. But Kenny, hang on a second, because when all the stuff you're talking about, if that comes to pass, it seems like that's going to be a heck of an opportunity for our industry in terms of building automation control and analytics. Just think of, the counting people in and out of a space and then being able to send an alarm or even document that you got certain people in and out of a space.
Thermal cameras. We just saw an interesting presentation with the Roger Rebenak where Fluke and some of these camera manufacturers, they've already used them in prisons to. That's an interesting environment because they always have to deal with the possibility of a mini pandemic. If somebody brings an illness into a confined space like that, and everybody's going to get it, and that's flu will come and it'll go through everybody that's inside the prison facility, including the guards and the prisoners. So they got to measure that stuff the best way they could. But I see the day you walk up in front of a station and you get scrutinized by some technology as far as your body temperature, asks you the questions, you answer them, whatever, and then it gives you access to where you're supposed to go and tracks you for the time that you're in the building to the time you leave, so that they could audit and say that we've done the COVID-19 measures and we can prove it.
Okay, but Kenny, hang on. We got 300,000 people a year that die from the flu every year. So are you going to then all of a sudden go, well, we got to monitor the flu too, and what about these other diseases?
That's the scary end of that's the slippery slope. That's the scary end of the stick there. Yeah.
Well, I kind of look at this two perspectives as our industry. I see there's a business side to this and an operational side. So let's look at the operational side, and I think you guys were hitting on several of those things. So one is, I think what a benefit out of this is we've now seen the true value of remote access to equipment and systems and things like that, the importance of remote access. Two, I think what we're going to see is the whole concept of open offices. That's going to change. I think they're going to have to be reconfigured, and practicing, further distance from each other. If we use the 6 foot barometer, then that's fine. I think to the earlier point, what you mentioned earlier, Eric, about remote employees, now that everybody's got a taste to that, and people were the big challenge was, will it work? and it's obviously worked for many companies. And I think you'll see many companies start to continue that practice with remote employees. And then, I think we'll see an increase in use of sensors, especially when it comes to the indoor environment, indoor air quality, occupancy, all of that. To your point, there's only so many people are allowed in a room, and so forth. And data, I think data is now really elevated itself as a result of this. And I guess, my question then is to this from the operational side, are we going to see new governance coming across that a building must meet A, B, C, or D type of codes or new things coming on board? And then imagine I go see Kenny or I go see Eric. Again, they may do that pre-screening or that screening. And again, the privacy is one thing, but here, glad you could come see me, Mark. Here's a branded mask that says my company on it, Lynxspring, and we're here to meet and so forth and so on. So I think, one last thing on the operational side is insurance. Look at the cybersecurity insurance. Are we going to have virus or viral insurance, extra insurance protection? And Kenny, your daughter's insurance, so maybe she knows. They could be already talking about it, as far as I know. But so I think we've got to look at this from the operational side as well as the business side. It's no doubt changed in both sides. So.
Well, this is a really good conversation, and as many things as I think I know. I was on that Totem Trusted. They had an introductory thing where they gave the messaging and how we're all now put into position. This is our domain. Buildings are our domain. The control of HVAC equipment, maintaining RH levels that are optimal for the hosts against viruses, maintaining RH levels that help get rid of viruses and give them an environment they can't sustain themselves in, selling ionization purifiers, selling UV light. All of a sudden we now are on center stage, and people are asking us a lot of questions. And some of the interesting things I picked up was that no one has all the answers, and don't pretend like you do, because if you do, and somebody puts all their stock in your expertise, and you're not really sure what's going on, because we don't have any training for this stuff. We have training on the domain expertise of buildings and how to program stuff and select equipment and do stuff, but giving people consultation on how to deal with COVID-19 to make their building a safe environment, it requires an ongoing training, but we do have the head start. And some of the messaging that this Totem Trust shared was that you become a portal, but you tell people what you don't know and tell them that you're going to find out and get back to them. And what it does is it gives people a sense of confidence that you're adhering to all the COVID-19 measures that you're aware of, and that you're keeping abreast of the new ones as they come out, the modifications, the changes. But we will see the standards, Marcus. To your point, there's going to be insurance concerns. There's going to be the real estate industry is going to go through some serious dynamic changes.
Well, hang on, Kenny. Dude, you said so much. I want to expound on a point you and Mark made, and then we'll go into because I think the real estate industry is going to go through some serious changes. Mark, I certainly hope it's not to the point where we have to wear a mask when we go in, because you start thinking about going to bars, and because people wear masks in bars versus buildings. I'm thinking. And this is where I think the opportunity for us is, I think it's a great opportunity for people like Ashray, for consulting engineers, Kenny, to write that kind of stuff in the spec. Make sure the humidity is at a certain level. We had, Luis Melgueras on a couple of weeks ago talking about how humidity really helps thwart any sort of viruses, the ionization, those types of things. And then I think where it comes back to us is with the building automation side of it is having the documentation, i.e. the analytics, the reporting, so that protects us. But boy, I sure hope it's not about having to wear a mask. I hope it doesn't get to that.
Yeah, I hope so too, because again, that takes the personal side out of it and things like that. But will we get to a point where buildings are, and we'll just use the virus today as an example, that it's rated. How in certain cities in the United States, there's a rating on when you go into a restaurant, A or a 90% or whatever it is. Will buildings be rated that way at some point in the future? I don't know.
Well, see, Mark, I think you got a great point there, because getting to Kenny's original thought is that I think if you're a building owner, that's a heck of a way for you to be able to leverage this and differentiate yourself. In other words,
Absolutely.
we've taken these steps and then make it visible
Mhm.
through, analytics or graphics or whatever. So, I mean, companies like J2 Innovation, some of the people that do the graphics, DG Logic and stuff like that, have a great opportunity to do that. Because I think one of the unintended consequences of this is we get back to the fact that working from home seems to be working. Everybody's forced into doing it. So, Mark, I want you to go back to your Madison Avenue days, and instead of ferreting out the supermodels and working on the advertisement, let's say you're in charge of the accounting for that firm, and now all of a sudden you realize that you've got 100,000 square feet or whatever for your 700 people, and you realize that 600 have worked from home for the last 3 months, and you haven't lost any productivity, and now it comes time to renew your lease. Are you thinking, I really don't need 100,000 square feet? I could probably get by on 10,000 or 20,000 square feet and still have the majority of my people work from home?
I think that is a more real than you think. Because again, I think as we look at all the facets of a building today in our industry, it's not only about temperature and humidity and lighting and all the stuff like that, but it is the performance of that building. And if I've got 6 floors in a building, 10 floors in a building, and I only need half of those, I don't want to be responsible for maintaining those and whatnot. I'll go look for some more space, to your point, or I will sublet that space out. So if I'm an owner.
Again, this is a fascinating conversation because you mentioned virus rated, but you know how we had green screens come into where you have leads and you have all these different ideas if you're friendly to the environment or whatever. Now you're going to see that emphasis is going to be an expectation. I mean, users are going to expect it. And the mobile beacons and the Googles and the Apples and this technology where, I recently got an iPhone 11 and I got facial recognition for my, to instead of putting in a 6-digit code, now I just hold up my face and I do it. I got the ability to pay with the fingerprint, and with the, whatever. So I don't know exactly where it's all going to intersect, but
you're George Jetson. I love it. Go ahead.
Hey,
sorry.
Well, but I'm just saying. So imagine if you're being monitored let's just say there's a COVID test and you either took it or you didn't take it. And when you take it, you get this little ding that shows you've been COVID tested and you don't have it. And let's just say you didn't get COVID tested and you don't have this designation that could be put into any of your mobile first devices that you did or do not, you tested positive or tested negative, whatever. So the point being is that if you're going to start seeing this sort of thing happen. They're doing it in China, by the way, already. So, I mean, all you can do is kind of look where the wheels already been rolling on the ground there or the street. And so imagine if you're either you can get into the building because you've got your test and you proved that you're not positive, your admittance is permitted. And if you don't have it, you're denied admittance until you get this certification that you're not COVID active or tested. So I'm just saying it's coming, whether you want it, whether you don't want it, whether you do it because the technology is there, and the the ubiquitous nature of it, the greater good for the greatest number is going to prevail in these circumstances. I think because these governments have got to deal with pandemics that are costing them. What's a pandemic cost the United States government so far? Probably $3 trillion. I mean, I don't even know what that means, $3 trillion. But who's going to pay for all this stuff? And and so, what kind of a surplus tax or taxing strategy are you going to have to get this stuff paid for? So, and I told you about the yard workers. There they are. They're outside my window there, which is a great sign. I'm so happy to see them. Come on in, guys.
What's interesting, as things come to the surface during this time. I read something recently where a group did a study on energy savings. And because, you think people aren't inhabiting the buildings and, reduced staff, et cetera, that, you cut back on the systems, lighting, everything, and so forth and so on. And what they found was there was only about a 25% savings in energy from this, because most of the buildings did not have remote access, and they were not sending anybody back in there to do the adjusting and things like that. But can you imagine, though, I mean, how much energy we could be saving in this is a plus side in this whole thing. But the fact that there's no remote access, or even intelligent building systems for that matter, and that number, 25% energy savings, shocked me. It was far lower than I would have ever expected. So.
Well, Marcus, well, that's a great point. And now I want you to put your marketing hat back on for a minute. And for our integrators or service companies out there, I mean, if you're in charge of their marketing, and we'll just get real capitalistic about this, how are you capitalizing on this? What is your message? How are you changing what you're doing? Given the fact that we're probably going to have a slowdown at some point in time, but there seems like there's tremendous opportunities. But what are those opportunities as you see them, and what advice would you give to, our service companies or integrators out there who are listening right now in terms of marketing?
Well, I think first and foremost is, and we've talked a little bit about this so far, is remote access, remote monitoring. First and foremost, if the system integrator contractors, your customers you don't have remote monitoring, remote access with them, to me, that's a great opportunity to open that up and a whole new level of conversation, if you will. I think also the fact that being able to do more control off-site as well. And again, the key to that is the remote access. So I think that's important. And then 3 is the fact that what can they do to help ensure, like you would cybersecurity, virus protection. Take all these steps to ensure that if this happens again, or just even the common everyday cold or flu, what additional measures and technology and solutions can they bring to the table to add to those buildings? So I look at it that this is a whole new opportunity, and I hinted to a word, recovery preparedness. If I were them, I would be thinking about, all right, what's next? How can I go in there and add additional value to my customers?
And Marcus, I think for the consulting engineers, I mean, to me, it's obvious. I mean, come up with some standards and some specs and market yourself as somebody that's going to make your building safe, and make sure that the people that are putting stuff in are applying to those standards. Same thing for ASHRAE. I think they can make yourself extremely relevant by sort of taking this head on and creating new standards. From a manufacturer standpoint, Marc, you're with Lynxspring, and I don't want to give away secrets because I'm sure you guys have kind of always are ahead of the curve and probably already thinking about this. But from a manufacturer standpoint, what do you do to your product to again, same question, to take advantage of the situation, so to speak?
Well, again, I think 2 things for us, and what we're already looking at, is obviously continue to make it easy to do remote access built into hardware and software to make it easy, make it, just basic, just switching a few little things here or there, and you're good to go. The other is the increased use of sensors. So we already have a product with connecting to Monet sensors. And so we need to increase the types of sensors that there are that works with this particular system. So for us, that's what we're looking at. And a few other things that I'm not gonna bring up at all that have resulted with conversations from a particular client, customer of ours. But I think everybody in the industry, all the technology manufacturers, we're all looking at stuff.
Yeah.
And but to your point, I think getting ASHRAE, getting the consulting engineering community and all that, all of us work together and come up with some suggestions and
Right.
things that we all should be doing.
Well, and I'm going to get to Kenny in 1 second because we're
Yeah, how he
gonna-
controls it. It's so
No,
clever.
hang on.
Like how you do that.
We're gonna go down a serious path with Kenny Smyers here, so you're not gonna want to miss this. But again, if I'm a building, my whole thing is, a building owner, I am marketing that my building is safer than anybody else's building, and but I got to tell you, Kenny Smyers, 007, one of the smartest guys in the industry, he has studied conspiracy theories over the years. He actually knows who actually killed JFK, but the government told him if he says anything on it, then he's in big trouble. So his lips are sealed on that. But Kenny, let's have a little fun with this. So what possible conspiracy theories could be linked to this whole thing? I mean, obviously one of them is, you and I talked about it, is they're going to try and get rid of the baby boomers so they don't have to spend pay us off with Social Security, right? So create a virus that attacks older people, and the politicians
Well,
get the
before I
virus.
go out on that walk that plank, I'd like to just kind of summarize the things you guys were hitting on is so crazy, because if you diagram the flow chart or the conversation that we've had here, what are you telling contractors to do? What are you telling building owners to do? Well, I'll tell you what you need to do is, the only thing that's going to really put you back in this game and let you catch up is technology, and you need to employ technology. If you're a building owner, you need to put in a framework. You need a wireless 5G system. You need a Niagara framework. You need passive logic. You need something in that building right now to get you on board to all that remote stuff that Marcus was talking about. You need to be able to integrate everything. Now more than ever, security is finally going to bubble up and take the front seat in this whole conversation, because if you had access control and CCTV and you had Niagara or whatever your framework is, whether it's J2 Innovations, Fin, if you have something in there that takes these subsystems and put them into one, you've got this thing. The technology is there. Now you just need to put a strategy together to make it all work in your behavior. Where you're counting people, you're monitoring people's temperatures with thermal cameras. It's tied into your building automation. It's controlling your humidity and your temperature and doing everything you say. Then you got analytics. Then you do all your counting. You do all your archiving. You do all your alarming, because it's all there. So to tell a young contractor, an old contractor, or a medium-sized contractor, an age and size or whatever, get in the network business so that you're integrating these subsystems and producing the new way that buildings are going to be analyzed. The new green building is going to be the new COVID-19 building. I see it coming. It's just like it keeps hitting. It's like a revelation. It just keeps the universe exploding, because there's so much potential here. But in order to meet all the requirements socially, economically, politically, and medically, you're going to have to get with this technical surge and use it to prove to yourself that you're safe and you're in a good environment. You need to prove it to other people that you get it and you're in touch with what the requirements are, and you need to demonstrate that professionally. And then as a building, you need to have somebody come and do different things, and it's not easy. Think about the maintenance. Think about how you're going to wash everything down and sanitize everything. How do you document that? We had a couple of guys on the show recently, Eric, where they do that. They have just like you go into Sheetz or some big gas station chain where you come out of the restroom and it says on the door, management checks this facility every hour. You're going to need to do that in a building. Every office is going to have to say, what's my temperature? What's my humidity? How do I prove it? How do I do it? Where's my documentation? And it has to all be done using the intelligence that we have, the artificial intelligence, the business or building, the machine-to-machine language. This is it.
Yeah, dude, I don't disagree with that, but again, I mean, you got to start right away with 5G, because there's a lot of people out there who think 5G was the whole reason that coronavirus came about in the first place. So,
what conspiracy? Let's go. Let's go down that plank.
But what's interesting though is Kenny, you made a good point about, to me, technology is, and I'm not saying it's everything, it's part of this whole solution. There's no question about it that technology is. I was interesting. I discovered, and I've got a conversation set up next week with a group out of Antwerp. They have developed a digital bracelet that you give to occupants and employees that senses the distance that you are at to your fellow employee or your fellow associate. And then a buzzer goes off, an alarm goes off, so that you're always being monitored, and they're seeing this as the next thing to give to companies within buildings to help protect the employees.
Let's hope not, Mark, for crying out loud.
That's what?
Let's hope not, for crying out loud. And I think that's where I'm getting back to the conspiracy thing is, look, you know, I mean, you and I and Kenny lived through Y2K. For our youngsters who might remember, in 1999, they were convinced that the world was going to come to an end because the computers couldn't roll over to 2000. I mean, we've lived through the swine flu. We've lived through all these things. And I'm not making light of the coronavirus, but to both your points, yeah, technology is the answer or a answer to curb it. But at what cost? Because look, once they start mandating, you have to wear bracelets or you have to wear, you know, chips that are monitoring your vitals, even though it's for the greater good, as Kenny said. I mean, where does your personal freedom go? And you know, what's interesting about this is we've willingly given it up with the iPhones and the smartwatches and all that stuff. We've willingly done it, but now it's mandated. How are people going to take that as, hey, you know, Kenny, I'm sorry, you can't leave your house today because you have a temperature. Well, Kenny, you can't go to the grocery store today.
It's like nuclear weapons. Maggie Thatcher, I'll never forget, listening to the speech she gave. I was over in Germany at the time. I think she said, you can't disinvent nuclear weapons. And everybody said, what the heck is that supposed to be? But the truth is, once it's out and once it's done, you can't put it back in the bottle. So that, you know, with liberties, I have good friends that they despise, you know, all this. You know, they really do. I mean, I have friends, you know, they grow their own food. They you know, they hunt. They don't rely on a government foundation to get them through the day. If the electricity stopped tomorrow, they can have generation. They got diesel generators. They got, you know, gas generators. I mean, these guys really take pride in the fact that they don't need to be on the grid to survive. But they themselves can't, you know, the day of the pioneer, it's like you always say about the change. There's a substantial change or the roly-poly change that comes back in cycles, and there's the ones that change and it never goes back. What has happened to privacy, what has happened through these marvelous devices here, you know, with the hundreds of years of technology come into this thing in like 5 years. When the iPhone was, it's not even, is it 10 years old yet? But it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. You can't put it back. So the concept of privacy, the way we compare it, because in our age group, we grew up with black, you know, colored TVs and black and white TVs, where when I saw colored TV for the first time, it was like, holy moly. And not everybody could have them. Cars, you know, I remember, you know, going back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, I saw gasoline in Ohio for $1.25. When was the last time we had gas in the United States at $1.25? You know, 1974, 1975, I was trying to figure it out. But my point is that, you know, I agree that you're not going to like it, and your privacy the way you used to be before the iPhone, pre-iPhone, that version of privacy and the after iPhone version of privacy are two remarkably different worlds, and they'll never be the same. So you either pick up an iPhone and deal with it, or you go hide out in the woods and don't have an iPhone. You're muted.
No, I don't think it's necessarily digital. I think that's a possibility. I think the government would love that. We're talking conspiracy theory. No, I think there's got to be a middle ground where, yeah, you're not going to put the genie back in the bottle, but who's watching the genie?
Hey, good question. Hopefully the guys and girls that, you know, still believe in that participation. I think so many people have surrogated their politicians or politics. They go with the most recent show that, you know, the noisiest show or whatever, or you know, the funnest show or the handsomest show, the prettiest show. So they really don't do a lot of work to know about privacy.
No, exactly. And technology makes us a lot more efficient. I would agree with that. But does it make us dumber? I mean, are we smarter now than we were 50 years ago before all this stuff?
Well, you'd have to have, I have a friend that I got their book right here. They wrote a book on education and the high school education we had back in the 50s, right after the Cold War, and we were doing the STEM advancements. What those kids had to do to get out of high school was remarkable. They had to recite the Gettysburg Address. They had to do algebra 1 and 2 and geometry. Or you couldn't pass high school. You didn't get out of high school. You couldn't expect anybody in this day and age to do that. We got people who don't even know who the president and vice presidents are. You stop 10 people on the street, they can't even tell you who the president.
No, you got a great point, Pam. I got to hop in here because I don't know whether this is really smart or really dumb. So, you know, obviously our kids are being homeschooled. So Evelyn has like math to do, my 7-year-old, right? So And so she gets her math done and she's getting everything right. And then, then I'm going, man, she's really smart. And then the next day I kind of come in a little bit earlier and I hear her go, Alexa, what's 7 + 4? 11. And then she writes it down. So I don't know whether she's being super smart or she's missing an opportunity to learn something that, I'm saying, I don't know the answer to the question. And maybe the answer is some yes, some no.
Well, do you remember the days when we didn't even have calculators? I remember calculators were novel with we had to do that all by computation. If you were trying to get pass a CLEP test to do something, you didn't have a calculator. You had a piece of white paper and 2 pencils, not 3.
Exactly. 2. With a lot of erasers, yes.
And so, but again, I don't know if it's a contest. There's really a need to measure who was smarter, when, where, whatever. And I think you always use the advantage that you're given. It's like Shakespeare wrote one of the when we were doing poetry analyzation about the thing was, can you graft a pretty flower into a hardy vine and produce a new Frankenstein flower that took the advantage of having this hardy, robust thing? It could live through cold weather and dry times.
I'm going to use a different analogy. I know what you're saying, Kenny, and I think that's valid, but here's another analogy. So if you give everybody calculators and they never learn how to add and subtract, and you take the calculators away, now they're slaves. As long as the technology stays, that there's one thing to that. But we're sort of going off into philosophical.
No. I see your point. I see if you have total dependency on something,
right,
like the internet. Right. Hey, listen, you want to go through a good structure on that? Read about the military. Go through military training where you start out where you lose base electricity. There's no more power. So you hear all the generators kicking on, and those batteries better carry all those cameras during that 30, 40 seconds till the generators kick on and take on the power. And they knock out the generators, Eric. Right. And then they knock out everything. You're working with flashlights and the primary means of communication is runners.
No, I totally get it. So let's imagine, because with Marc's product and all that, it's going to be 5-10 years from now, you're not going to have to know about chillers or any of that stuff, because his controls are going to troubleshoot it and do everything, and that's going to be great. And let's take it out 25 years from now until the power goes out or the conductivity goes down, and now somebody's sitting there's got to figure out how to make the chiller work, who's never had to do it because
it's all automatic.
Has done it for it. Yeah. So
go ahead, Marc.
So I'm going to switch while I've got you guys. So let me ask you this. So within the segment of buildings, you have commercial office, you got light industrial, you have universities, you have hospitals, whatever. What's y'all's thought about coming out of that? Are there going to be certain segments within the market that are going to be more opportunities will be created? See, I've got an opinion in that. So, for example, in the hospital medical facilities, I think one of the lessons that we've learned from this is that in a pandemic like this, we are not set up to handle this. We were not set up to handle this. So will the hospitals have governance and have regulations put forth before them that says that in order for you to maintain your accreditation, like JCO or the various hospital accreditations, you have to do some of the following. So one would be you have to take X amount of square footage and number of beds within your hospital and reconfigure them to be COVID virus or alike ready. So what would that require? That obviously would require certain equipment like internal ventilators and all that. But what about the environmental systems? To your point earlier, Kenny, the lighting, the humidity, so forth and so on. And in order for that for you to comply, it has to be a completely separate system from the main system, which it would normally go. So that's one I think is going to happen. Two is certain trauma hospitals, like here in Virginia, we have Medical College of Virginia, John Hopkins, Pennsylvania, you have yours. Atlanta, I think you've got Granville or whatever it's called.
Grady,
thank you. Is that you have to build a separate facility that is basically viral ready to accept patients. So I think this is from a business segment. this is going to be a good this will be an opportunity for all of us in this industry, if that makes sense.
Agreed.
Makes perfect sense, and I agree.
And then look at universities. What is one of the things that has come out of this? Online learning, e-learning. Will they require as many facilities?
No.
Because at the end of the day can more students get their degrees and continue their studies online versus having to go to a campus, whether
Absolutely.
for the day or,
that was one
semester.
That I had that circled. That was going to be one of the things I was coming to, Mark. And you're so right, because I think what you're going to see, even with universities, and I don't know if you guys had the same project. We had YMCA's go up here around Pittsburgh that were incredible facilities. I mean, they had the YMCA part with the pools, but they also had small annexes. They had hospitals. They had surgical areas inside of YMCA. I think anybody in the big business, big building business, to include universities, is going to find themselves to take on an additional role. You're not going to build a school just to build a school anymore. It's going to have the ability to do civil, performances, in the event there's a pandemic. From now on, we saw there was a shortage of emergency hospitals, whatever, but we saw stadiums, university, football fields. We saw, indoor arenas become, emergency shelters, the Javits Center in New York. You're going to start seeing a more comprehensive, more of a federal FEMA style of living and construction and whatever, so that this building might be the theater for normal operations, but it could also serve as an emergency, dormitory or surgical. I don't know, surgical, because surgical requires those equipment you're talking about. But yes, you can see that. I think again, it's more of civil defense and civil preparedness. Back when we were young, we used to actually have air raid mornings, and we would literally go out of the buildings into an air raid shelter and wait it out. Then the horns would sound. So we're going to see that kind of lifestyle get more integrated into it, because I think we've been floating on the outside of a bubble for a while, that things just are too good to be true, and something like this happens. Like you were saying about the flu, where it killed 300,000 people, and the swine flu came and went and whatever, but never did it shut down the world. Never did it shut down travel.
That gets back to the conspiracy theory. Yeah.
Then there has to be the problem that they're talking about with WHO, and they're talking about what really did happen and how it did originate. We know that there's some mud there that we're not going to ever see through those waters will never clear up. And I just understand because you can't expose and share that kind of information with everybody in the public domain, because there's that's why you have governments, and that's why you have different agencies that handle that sensitive stuff. But there's some stuff I'm sure that we don't really have a clue that are actually probably on the verge of happening, or could have happened, or happened in past, like the meteorite that passed between the moon and the earth a couple Christmases ago. It was actually that close, and they didn't even announce it until 30 days after it happened, because had they told everybody, they would have panicked. So I'm sure your conspiracy, I'm sure that if you dug into this, you could find yourself some very genuine nuggets of information that it just doesn't play out in the real world.
Right. Well, I want to hop back and answer Mark's question a little bit too, because if we were starting right, and let me set this up a little bit. So, Evelyn, my 7-year-old, she's getting a fantastic education. Her teacher has a Zoom meeting today, and it's Evelyn and 4 of her other students that are sort of at the same level, right? And then she has Zoom meetings all day with the different kids, but she groups them in different levels. So Evelyn's able to get just a fantastic education there. Anna, my wife, has found 3 or 4 other teachers that are looking to supplement their income that are teaching like Spanish and all these other subjects. So my daughter is actually, the quality of her education is probably through the roof right now, right? And we're able to do it on a time frame. The only challenge is obviously we have to be home, and we have to sort of monitor, and we have to make her do it. So, I mean, think about it now. If we did not have grammar schools right now, and we had this technology that we have where we could do the Zoom meetings, I mean, would you even build a schoolhouse?
Good question. Good. And it's interesting, you brought up that the teacher grouped 4 of them together who similar style or places in their education and so forth. To me, that is awesome, versus a teacher in a classroom with 23 people having to teach based on, in Virginia, we have SOLs. They have to teach to these so they can get the funding. And not every student is at that same level. Some students learn completely different. I remember my son, he was a visual person. You showed him something visually, boom, got it right. Versus non-visually, it was harder for him to comprehend that. But see, so that right there is unbelievable value to education, to Evan, Grace.
Yeah, it is. And, and you think about it, because we're going to have to pay for all this, to Kenny's point.
Sure.
And, and I doubt this will happen, but I mean, just to have those schools, it's outside of having a babysitter for the kids. I mean, which is kind of what the main function would be now, given that you can get a better education having them remotely than coming to the building. You're thinking, well, having them go to school is really good because, now the parents can go to work, right? And then people will argue that, well, but they get socialized too. And then I would argue back and go, yeah, I remember how I got socialized. Most of that stuff wasn't really good. It's by the grace of God that I even survived being socialized, right? So, people have been advocating for, go ahead.
Well, again, this is a fabulous conversation. I hope our Control Trends community, because we always make that analogy about there are three guys at a bar having a couple of beers and talking about the world.
We've had a bunch of beers.
The things about, the pros and cons, the socialization and whatever. I mean, this is really an interesting conversation because you'll have different persuasions. There was a big push, remember, back home-based education, and then you had these schools that were going to make these gigantic schools where both parents. There was a push in North America at one time economically to stop the flow of migration from the Mexican workers coming to America and the Canadian. What their hourly rate was, that it was all going to wash out. That the Mexican rate would go up to $6-7 an hour. The United States union rate would fall down to $15-16 an hour. Canada would move up from like $10 to $12 to $13, and they believed this would stop. Everybody would start just producing in place, and workers wouldn't migrate the way they were doing. And it was a giant calamity because you had to dumb down education, and you had both parents had to go to work all day, just make just enough money to come back and pay for the mortgage, the house, and TV and telephone, and basically the schools were the surrogate parents, and you would send your kid to school from 6:30 in the morning till they came home with the parents would coincide. And then these giant school districts would have, disciplinary things. They would have like, Schumann centers where if kids were bad kids, they could stay overnight in detention and then go to school with the students. I mean, these plans were actually presented at a school board meeting, and of course they were voted down. It was horrendously, just the whole concept just turned everybody off in our area. But my neighbor, that's where he began home-based education. When he first heard these ideas that were being, these experimental ideas to deal with NAFTA and to deal with big economic problems and where the future of the American household was going to be, the American families was by design that both parents would go to work all day, come home at the same time the kids did from school. And it was incredibly to read about this, like that was actually plausible. Was just, I don't know if it happened in your area, but they picked certain parts of the country to do this experiment with.
Right.
And it failed, and miserably. But
to Eric's point,
yeah.
Will we see a reduction in education, the construction, and upgrading of educational
We've already
facilities?
said, when we talk about the mush market, you have municipalities, university schools, and hospitals. We've seen the medical world, the hospital world markets rise.
Hospitals, yes, I agree.
We've seen the schools, the state schools, universities that are out there, and we have 20 state schools that are all pretty much the same. One was designed for paraplegics, so it was a very flat area. A lot of kids that had disabilities could go there because their wheelchairs. It was the first handicap accessible school, one of the first in the country, and it was remarkable. So each school had its own little purpose. One was a sports school, one was an arts, a theater school, but now the way I understand it, we have experienced a very low volume of business from these schools. They're barely covering, they're not, the freshman and sophomore years are being done online or CCACs that are, they've upped their game, and the state schools, universities, state universities have just their
Mhm.
big thing now is to buy foreign students to bring them in. We've got
Right.
students from all over the world at these state schools that when you go there, you feel like you're in a different country because
Right.
the vast majority of students are Asian or Middle Eastern.
Right. Well, yeah, and Kenny, I think you bring up a great point. And I brought up the thing about Evelyn primarily just to say from my experience, her quality of education has gone way up. And with the exception of having to be there to sort of babysit her and make her do it, I mean, I'm just seeing huge leaps. Axel started reading his first book at 5. So I'm just saying, now, will the schools go away? I don't know. But this gets back to answering Mark's original question. I think hospitals, yes, we'll see more and more there. I think universities are kind of, I mean, it's sort of been a long time coming that they're kind of screwed, right? Because you start thinking about what it costs to send your kids to college, and you know, and it's a great experience. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's the experience you go for, the sports, the, you know, meeting people, the fraternities, the sororities, the education's kind of, you know, it's part of it, but that's not the primary focus. I don't think it will be, because to Mark's point, I mean, you can get an education so much less expensively, an online education, that you know, you lose all those other experiences. But if your purpose in going to school is to get an education, that's probably the most logical way to do it, with the exception of maybe going to medical school or law school or something like that.
I just wanted to say, there's a book called Four, F-O-U-R, and it's about the big ones. It's Amazon, Facebook, Google, and God, who's the other big giant? Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. No, not LinkedIn. It'll come to me. Apple. Yeah, that's it. And the book was it was called the T algorithm, and which one of these companies would get to $1 trillion first. I told you about it many times, Eric. But the very end of that book, he goes over education and universities and what it is, and he does it very historically about, you know, how the country was founded, how Harvard and Yale and all these schools just kind of, you know, one was more liberal than the other, and they just kept, but it was networking and it was socialization. I mean, you didn't just go to school to get an education. That's where you're going to get your wife or your future husband was going to be in that mix of people. The business ties that were so strong in those first initial universities, you know, with the Eli's, you know, from Yale and you know, in the historical, you know, political growth of our country emanated from universities and thoughts and academic centers. So that's all kind of changed. But he said to his end game on answering education, you go to the best school you can afford. That's where you go. Go to school, go to universities, go to the best school you can, because that's where you're likely going to meet your friends. If your investments, your insurance,
for us, for sure.
I'm saying what he said in this book.
I know.
This is a live book. Read it.
No, I understand. I read the book, but what I'm saying to you is that, yeah, I think that's the way it was. But now, I mean, people don't meet people even face to face. They meet people online. I mean, you talk about finding your future wife. I mean, how many people you know actually? I mean, the younger people. I mean, we're talking about a trend here. There are exceptions.
Yeah.
But.
So go back. I got two more things. So just one on the universities or education, and one. So you go and you get your degrees online. Great. You go into the job market. Great. Oh, I see you got your degree from University of Virginia, Georgia Tech. Don't want to leave Pennsylvania School, Penn State. There you go, Kenny. Or whatever.
University of Pittsburgh.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So, Mr. Stromquist, I'm glad you came in for this interview today. Oh, I see you got your degree from Emory University in Atlanta. Great school. Oh, did you get it? Did you attend 4 years, or did you get it online? Oh, I got it online. Is the employer going to look at that education differently than they would as a normal, let's just say I guess today it's 5-year program, you know, whatever it is. But yet it says you graduated, you got your degree from Emory.
Listen, I'm going to tell you from my perspective, and to your point, it would matter to me, again, to Kenny's point, if it was somebody selling insurance or, you know, financial type stuff, because, you know, it's knowing people, right? For me personally, if I see somebody that's educated himself and didn't go to college but figure out how to educate themselves, they are much more impressive to me than somebody that got spoon-fed 4 years at Emory, right? I mean, they just are for me personally. Mm-hmm. But I think it sort of varies. But then again, you know, that's looking from an employer's sort of standpoint. But then from a parent standpoint, you got a grandkid coming up. You know, mm-hmm. Kenny, you got a grandkid coming up. I got, you know, 2 kids that got to go to college. And you start the trade-off.
Mhm.
It's it's a big piece. But again, getting back to your deal, I think universities are going to struggle.
So we can end in an up note. I think another sector that we will see a lot of new opportunities for our industry is the government sector, whether DOD, DOE, GSA, military bases, all the government, especially on the really the federal side. And because I think they are going to proceed with upping their systems to combat with things like coronavirus.
Lead by example type thing.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I'd agree with that. Plus, I mean, to think about the consequences of your military, like that ship where so many of the people were exposed to the COVID-19 and, so many, the one that scares me the most was the New York subways that, they had 4,000 some people had COVID-19 and they all worked in the subways and 600 of them died. Or I'm sorry, it's 400 some died. But that meant that concentrations for real. That meant that compact socialization and you went to work in a sick zone, there was a consequence. There was a lot of people that got COVID-19 because they worked for the public transportation system, New York City. And so there's your walk away thing. Do you want to work in an environment where they're not concerned about your state of being, your health,
well-being? Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't want to walk into a building where half the people in there got COVID-19 from it. And when do you determine that building's cleared then? What criteria do you use? What sanitation criteria? How do you maintain the integrity of that building? Now it's safe for human, habitat or whatever. So, but to your point about schools and everything, I think the conversation is where the real gem of this is. I think everybody's going to find their way through it, Eric. I think that I did a lot of, web-based stuff and I enjoyed myself, but I also enjoyed the mix of meeting other people and hearing, I use this example of tennis with the way one of these really good tennis instructors explained to the group of parents that were interested in getting their kids to the highest level of competition possible, was that there's 3 ways to learn. There's not just one. And if you only pick one way to learn, and that is you work this kid to death with the best pros and he just plays that pro back and forth, they'll be good, but they'll get to a certain point and they can't go any further. Or they can play against kids and watch this kid here struggle and see how he corrected his footwork, and they learned from watching somebody else being trained and being schooled. And that was another thing. And then competition, then just flat out, we're going to have one winner today. You guys you're going to play her. She's going to play him. And then you come out, and then everybody watches the competition to the very end and has to share in the unique experience of having competition. That it was a team type thing, but there's going to be a winner here. There's not going to be everybody's okay and everybody's. So that's how you.
What year was that, Kenny?
You know what? It's going on right now.
1800 and what? Sorry.
No.
Hey, guys,
Kenny, I'm
go
not
to
negating
go to any tennis camp around here, and you'll see it's still in play.
Okay, good.
Go to any baseball thing.
I'm glad to hear that.
Listen, they still want to have the best football teams, baseball teams, basketball.
Well, that's true. That's true. Sport. Yeah, you're right about
environment, that. You're going to find out how good you are.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I'm hoping that's one of those yo-yo trends that you call versus a structural trend that we'll get back where competition is something that people relish versus move away from. But hey, before we hop off, Marc, man, you got some good stuff going on Lynxspring. I think some training coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We've done a couple things. So we've created over the last year and a half a series of CBTs. You talk about online learning, and they're really, really good. And we've offered them to our partners for a free 90-day trial period and then a discount if they decide to purchase them. We've got an exciting webinar coming up next week on the 23rd called Edge Enabled. And it's all about the edge and what it is, why the edge is here, why it's important. And then, of course, tie in our Edge Enabled product set to that. So, and then look for a new product coming out on the 28th, I think. And so we got a lot of things going on. So thank you for asking.
Well, that's Marc Petock at Lynxspring. Best website, Marc, is lynxspring.com.
That is correct.
Well, very, very cool. All right. Well, Kenny Smyers, you want to send us off anything? Kenny, you have the last word.
Well, it's so much fun. I can't believe that we're doing this. I don't know if anybody's still on the call or on the podcast, but it does give us a chance to really reevaluate things and put ourselves back into place in real life. So the COVID-19 thing, it's just, I still can't believe it. I'm looking at these people again. I'm finally seeing signs of life. I'm seeing cars go up and down the street, and there's people out there putting mulch on trees and cutting the grass.
Nice.
It's supposed to say Lynxspring on it, though. That'd be great.
That's right. I mean, that's right.
Hey, Eric, we'll do the first 100 people that call in. We'll give them Control Trends masks.
There you go.
We'll do something like that for sure. Well, listen, Marc, thanks so much. Kenny, as always, appreciate you, brother. To our audience out there, man, stay safe. Remember, be bold, stay in control, wash your hands, stay safe. Don't shake anybody's hand, and go compete at something. Anything.
You're not going to let me forget that one for a while.
Unless you say indeed.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, Kenny. And that's a wrap. We'll talk to you next week.